Today's webinar is going to be consisting on calendar management for meeting and events. So there's a few things that you should have knowledge about prior attending to this webinar. And we really want you to understand the DataBank basic functionality. And that's, pretty much understanding what a contact record is, how to create, a meeting, where you would go within your database to do that, and so forth. Um, it's very essential that you will understand these components in order for us to go ahead and have a better understanding on the calendar management for your meetings and events. So in today's training, we do have some learning objectives, and that's going to be to edit your existing calendar, and that's mainly the form associated to your meetings or events. How to create new calendar forms for different meeting types, customize your registration forms and your email confirmations, and then just to get a better understanding on, participation, registered multiple contacts for a particular meeting or event. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're just going to go ahead and get started and dive in. So primarily for today's session, which will conclude the meetings and events training, we're going to be focusing on the forms part of your database. So here you'll see a list of my current existing forms. If I click on the top form type or description or the data was modified, I can go ahead and segment my different types of forms depending on which column you do go ahead and try to filter by. But to go ahead and dive into the specific meeting forms that we'll be working for is that, the meeting form itself will control most aspects of your meeting registration. So for example, if I just go ahead and click on the meeting name, this is right now my calendar form that's embedded onto my website. So everyone and anyone can do this for their organization. So right now we have our nonprofit's website and we have the calendar form embedded into our events section of our website. So individuals can go ahead and decide what meeting or event they want to register for and click on the designated meeting name to go ahead and finish that registration process. So within your meeting form, again, this is what your potential constituents, contacts, individuals that go towards your website will see through their front end interface. We go into the forms section and do one or two things. Everyone should have an existing meeting form within their forms section. If you don't have this option, then you can click on this plus icon and select the corresponding calendar form. Ideally, both do have the payment section, so it really doesn't matter which one you select. But for most part, you can just select one or the other. So like all other forms, you need to have a form ID and the form title. Because I'm just gonna go ahead and go over our existing one, I'm gonna go ahead and click on the edit icon. When you click on the edit icon, you can also, again, if you do have an existing meeting form already, you can also duplicate it. It'll create a duplicate meeting and event form. All you would have to change is the form ID along with the title. So the title is something that your prospects, constituents will be seen. So it'll be part of the way that it gets shown into the public facing. You'll notice here that the HTML template has been set to an iframe, and this pretty much ensures that there's the embedded version of this form onto my website rather than using any of my other, form HTML templates. So the main thing to understand, and this is kind of piggyback writing from what we discussed on the previous webinar, is that you can have multiple calendar forms based on the different, meeting types that you have within your database. So it's really optional whether you want to keep everything all in one place or if you want to have things, separate. So you could have an event for, all your organization, general events, and then one for your volunteer events and so forth. So creating more than one calendar would just mean that you want to separate your meeting by types, whether it's trainings, whether it's social events, fundraisers, etc. So now that we understand the property section, everything that exists within this particular section, the calendar tab is going to allow you to select what you want your particular calendar form to display for its particular form, right? So your custom introductory message here, this is the same thing that we see here. So a lot of the times you can write a very general note um, for your particular calendar form. You could put in pictures, links, etc. So it really depends what you're trying to convey, but that's what your um, calendar form will be displayed across all event registrations. So it will be this top part. Then, if we keep scrolling down, um, here we have the search component. So here you can decide what if you want to include a search area intro. So the search area intro is pretty much going to be this section. So if you want individuals to search by event type, search by the event name, the event date, then that's part of the fields that are available to showing your search fields. If you want to remove, if you want to add, all you have to do is check the little checkbox. Then we're going to scroll down, and here is where you can go ahead and decide if this particular calendar form is going to be for all of your events or if this is the type of events that you want to go ahead and keep separate. So in this particular form, we can see that include events of type all. So it's going to include all training, all recognition, all member only, all meeting, fundraising, events, conference, and board meeting, right? So we can see that all of our upcoming events are part of our annual event happening. And so that's why we know that all our events are happening and being displayed for this particular form. Again, you can decide what fields you want to include when you are giving a preview for individuals who are registering for this particular meeting or event. So the date, the meeting name, the event details, available spaces, type. If I didn't want to include available spaces, then this particular section would not be shown. So again, depending what information you do want to go ahead and select, then that's what the information that would populate. Again, just registration and configurable terms that you can edit for your particular calendar form. So notice here how when I spoke about include events of type, here for this particular calendar form, we have all. If I just briefly opened my form section again and click on the other calendar form that I have, you will notice, and I'm just going to go ahead and demonstrate this. Within our calendar tab, the include events of type, it's only member only, meaning that only meetings or events that have the type associated with member only will be shown for this particular calendar. Because I don't have any member only events, it will not display anything. But keep in mind that because the all is not selected, the other 3 events that are currently out there, for the annual event are not being displayed. And so that's the main idea and the main concept when we are referring to keeping multiple calendar forms for different meeting and event types. So in this particular case, we're showing the particular example of one displaying, like your annual events or your one calendar that contains all of your upcoming events or meetings. Whereas this particular calendar that has been created is only for your member only events, which again is displaying correctly because we don't have any member only events associated or created within our data link. But if we did, this is what would be populated. So that's the main distinction that we want to make sure that you get across when you are creating your meeting or event. So again, if you want to go ahead and edit on any of this information, you can. So register for this event, register for this meeting, register for this exciting event. You can go ahead and update those uh, words and terminology when it comes to that. Show sharing option, if you want individuals to be able to share this meeting or event, then you can include it. And so the show sharing options, it's going to be, I'll go ahead and demonstrate it, the show sharing options. So if you don't want to include them, you can turn it off and it will go ahead and remove that. Show add to calendar. If I want to go ahead and remove that, then I can go ahead and do that as well. And if I want to change the terminology, then just put it in the text box, click submit, and that will be updated. So now when I come back, do a refresh on my particular page, you'll see that the only thing that I have is the email. And then when we move forward, the Tell a Friend tab is going to be the same exact thing that you would see within a normal form. So if you do want to update the text, add additional information, this would be the appropriate place to do so. Again, if your particular meeting or event doesn't include a payment option, then you don't have to worry about the contribution tab. If it does, this would be the appropriate place to ensure that the campaign is information is entered correctly along with any segments. But again, you will be doing this through the meetings and events creation. Keep in mind though, if whatever you do on your form, so whatever you do within like the payment option section, within the personal section, will be applied to the meeting and event registration, right? So what does this mean? So this means if this particular event required a payment and I didn't want to accept checked or a pay later, or have the ACH option, which is paid by, your bank account, then you would have to go ahead and uncheck that information within the payment options checkboxes. Once you click submit, it'll go ahead and apply those changes. Therefore, individuals won't have that option to pay by check, ACH, or pay later. But you have to do this change through the calendar form associated with that meeting or event that you have created. In this case, let me just go ahead and put check so we can go ahead and see what that would apply. And if we keep scrolling down, if you want to include text below amount options, in many cases we don't really recommend to require a card code, and you can learn more information by clicking on this link here. But one thing to keep in mind is that we don't store credit card information, and when it comes down to reoccurring payments, again, because we don't store that information, and let's say this particular form or any other form had the required card code, then those transactions wouldn't go through. So if it's ever the case that you or your organization want to require a card code, the ideal and best case scenario for that would be for one-time payments. And that would be like the only case, because if you're doing it for reoccurring payments, the contributions would not come through, and it would just cause a lot of erroneous errors that can easily be avoided. Then you have this option where you can ask individuals to cover your processing fees. So depending on your payment gateway, your processing fees may be applicable or maybe not, again, depending what the individuals are using. But for the most part, all payment gateways do have a processing fees that have to be covered. So rather than your organization covering for those, fees, you can always ask individuals to cover that as well when they're making their payment. So it's really up to you. Right now, I'm just going to go ahead and click submit, and we're just going to go ahead and go into the personal section. So again, earlier I said whatever you have within your personal section, your contribution, etc., will be applicable to when individuals fill out a meeting registration for this particular calendar form. Meaning, if I want to go ahead and add an address field, so a street address, a city and a state, then I have to add it within the calendar form so those changes can be applicable, right? So right now, if, for example, I was going through an existing, registration prior to making these changes, you'll notice that the only fields I have were the name, zip code, email, your custom field, Junie language support, and dietary restrictions. If I want, like I said, if I want to add the address information, then I would have to put it within the personal section of that calendar form. Therefore, if I want to go ahead and remove this, your custom field, and if I want to just go ahead and remove, do new language support, I just want to know the name, the address, your zip, and your email. But the two key things that I need for your registration are going to be just your name and your email. So I'm going to keep it like that so we can go ahead and see the changes once we click submit. And down below, we see the same prompts that get prompted within the personal tab in regards to your subscription setup. So you can decide what publications you want for individuals to be able to subscribe to. once they are filling out this form. So we can just go ahead and click submit. All right. And then we go back to the thanks and the email tab, right? So hopefully you already have an idea how these two things work. But the main thing to get across, the main message to get across, from these particular calendar forms is that you do want to make sure that the message is pretty much kept in a general format. So thank you for registering for the following meeting. We look forward to seeing you there. If you have any questions or need to cancel, please contact the facilitator. Again, if you have one facilitator for most of your events, you can just feel free to include that information here. Again, the hints will provide merge tags that you can include within your thanks and email message. So again, if you want to include donation information in case it's a donation itself, or meeting information, etc. And we can just even go ahead and put the meeting. And so once I go ahead and click this section, I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. And then I'll just actually keep the items info because I will be submitting the one with the payment. So I'm going to go ahead and click submit. And again, whether I'm filling out one event or two events, this will be the same thanks message that will populate for all of the events associated with this particular calendar. Same with the email. If it's within that same calendar form, this will be the same email that will be sent out to those meeting registrations. So in this case, here we have, we'll just include the meeting info and keep it like that. And again, you want to ensure that this is just a general message. So I know in current times like these, depending on how your organization is working with your current events or upcoming meetings, it is the case that if like you're running webinars on a weekly basis, and that webinar contains the same information, so the same login. So for example, like our current training webinars, data bank webinars, contain the same login, same GoToMeeting link, etc. You can enter that information within the thanks page or within the email. And then that information will be sent out to these individuals. So I'm just going to go ahead and click view, and I am going to go ahead and register for the annual event. Because I already registered under Dylan, it's actually going to just populate that information. So I'm just going to go ahead and click same person. And you'll notice here within my fields that the field information got updated, right? So the personal fields that I updated within the personal tab, so I made sure that I added that address component, is now located here. But because I added this extra option within the meeting or event registration, I have to answer this question in order for my registration to actually be completed. So I'm just going to go ahead and say I'm lactose intolerant, I'm vegan, and that's it. And I am just going to go ahead and click continue and say yes, this is another registration, and it's going to ask me for my payment. I want to put just the check, submit my payment, and again, This is the thank you message that we get. Thank you for registering for the following meeting. It populates, the meeting information along with the cart, so what I purchased for this particular event. And that same information will be received in my thank you email. So that's pretty much the main components that we want to make sure we covered for the calendar management for meetings and events. Um, we have some time for some questions, so I could go ahead and answer any questions that you may have. But we pretty much covered how to edit, any of your existing calendars, how you could create a new calendar form, how can you distinguish between multiple calendar form types, along with the registration components for a meeting or event, and how you can customize that. That's just pretty much giving you an overview of what we learned today. So I'll go ahead and take questions.